Learn Persian with Chai in Conversation, interview with Farnoosh Torabi. So Farnoosh Torabi, thank you so much for talking with me today.
Leyla, thank you so much. Leyla June.
Yeah, we had a little bit of technical difficulty, so we have to jump right into it. We have a shorter time.
We got it. We're Irooni. We can hustle. We can do it.
I know, but we've had a long buildup for this. So I'll tell everyone, I don't know if you remember this or not, but I met you many years ago at a podcast movement conference. Do you remember this?
I think I intentionally have forgotten everything about podcast movement. Nothing.
Really? Okay, well, it was like 2017 or 2018, and I saw your name, and you have the same name as my aunt. And I'm pretty sure I'd listened to your podcast before because you did a episode, Mr. Money Mustache.
Yes.
So I'd heard that, and I was like big into the FIRE movement. But then you were coming to the podcast movement, and I was like, oh my God, this is amazing. So I went up to you afterwards, and I was like, I'm Iranian, and I love personal finance. And you were like, girl, you're my people.
Yes. That's quite the Venn diagram intersection, like Iranian, like your aunt's name is my name. And Farnoosh is not very popular or common in Farsi in Iran. So,
is it not?
I've met 3 Farnooshes in my entire life.
Really?
Some men, some women. Yeah.
Okay, so Farnoosh Nuri is my aunt, and yeah, I love that name. It's a beautiful name.
Thank you.
But yeah, I was so excited, and I saw your talk, and you just started your podcast. You were doing the like 7 days a week.
Yes. Was that when I was on the panel with the 2 other gentlemen? Yes. I remember that. That was in Austin.
Dallas.
Right? Dallas? Okay.
Yes. Yeah. But anyway,
that was a good podcast movement. I liked that. The very first one I went to was very bro-y, and I didn't enjoy myself.
Oh, but yeah, since then, and then I actually co-hosted a show with you. So, and I am totally, I love personal finance. I love your show. I appreciate everything that you do. And this new book was fantastic. It was a lot of fun to read.
So thank you for writing that. Means so much. Thank you.
Yeah. And there's a lot of, for people in this audience, there's a lot of references to, you couldn't have written it without the background that you have with your parents coming from Iran. There's a lot of references to that in the book. There's a lot of references to your like growing up child of immigrants. You have a lot of Farsi references, so a lot of fun.
Yeah, good. I'm glad I left those Easter eggs for my Iranians in the reading room. But yeah, thank you. It means a lot.
Absolutely. And speaking of fear, like you sent an email about this yesterday about showing your mom the book. But can you talk about that a little bit? Because a lot of it is about your family, about your parents, about their struggles as immigrants. So how was that?
Oh my gosh, it was terrifying. But as I say, when something feels terrifying, maybe there's an opportunity, and this book for me was just a deep unpacking of my life. It started intentionally as a memoir, but thankfully it wasn't just that. I think it would have been a very sloppy memoir. My editor wanted me to really find the big idea throughout what is the big pattern or the themes that are showing up in a lot of your stories about childhood, but also adulthood. And it was this element of fear. But you're right. My mother has been a central character in my life, and thus a central character in this book. I tell stories in this book that I've never shared with anybody, including my mother. And I think like anybody who writes narrative form and reflects on their lives and includes people in their lives and gets personal, there's an element of fear because you're worried that your interpretation of events is not theirs. And will they be offended? Will they be upset? Will they be confused? Will they feel outed in some regards? And so as I was writing the book, I had a great book editor, Suzanne Kingsbury, and here and there I would ask her, I'd say, Suzanne, am I throwing my mother under the bus? I really don't want to. She's like, no, actually, because I think I'm so close to the material, I feel like it's such a unveiling of our privacy. But to the reader, it comes across, I hope, and to Suzanne, my coach, she said, it's coming across like your mother is actually the hero here.
Absolutely.
You're showing her vulnerability, but you're also showing how she paved the way for you and showed you in the best way that she could. I mean, not all parents are perfect. My mother was 19 when she came here, new to America, motherhood, marriage, all of it. And so I have to, in reflecting on all of that, I have so much empathy and understanding now. At the time, maybe, I didn't. Like, I don't understand my mother. Why is she so strict? Why is she so quiet sometimes when I want her to be more communicative? And I think it's because she was also struggling with her own fears of loneliness and rejection and finding her way in this country.
Right. And so the book is called A Healthy State of Panic, and it's about fear and about it starts off with a story of how you were called Tarsu as a child, which
Yeah,
can you talk a little bit about that? What is
sure.
Tarsu and what does that mean?
Tarsu, I feel like I'm taking your job right now.
Yes.
Tarsu is well, Tars means fear, and Tarsu is sort of like fearful one. I think we typically call it's a tease that we often attach to children or people who are being childlike. Oh, because even in the Iranian culture, fear is a taboo, or fear is not considered bravery or courage. It's sort of said in a mocking context. So as a kid, I was the Tarsu because, oh, I was so scared. My mother, again, intentionally raised me to be afraid of strangers and all of the things. I wasn't allowed to do a lot of things that my friends, American friends, could do easily without any second guessing, things
Right.
like sleepovers and ice skating and eating sugary cereals. And
Right.
so it was also the 80s, let's be honest. And Worcester, Massachusetts, back then was a pretty rough city, second largest city in Massachusetts. And even if it wasn't for my mother's fear mongering, it was inevitable that I was going to become a scared kid because of the way that the media was playing up the crime, the way
Absolutely.
that the milk cartons were, putting photos of kids that had been snatched. Like that's the first thing you're going to learn about, like before you even had your cereal. So it was the perfect storm, I guess, for me to become this tarsu. But back then I would use fear in not in the healthiest ways, right? I was a kid. I didn't know. So I would overreact. I would throw myself into oncoming traffic because I thought that the man in the schoolyard who was a dad who wanted to take me home, or rather take me to my mom's car across the street, was going to try to kidnap me. I had a substitute teacher in kindergarten, which was unannounced. He just showed up
Oh, wow.
and I ran out of the classroom banging on the other teachers' doors, begging them to
Wow.
save us from this stranger who had come in.
Wow.
Yeah. And it was so bad, my teachers had to have a conference with my mother. They were like, "This girl is on edge all day,
Wow.
and we wanna make sure everything's okay at home."
Yeah.
And
Wow.
it and it was like, but my mom was just over-indexing a lot on the fear because, again, she was in at this point now, her early 20s. Can you even imagine? I'm in my 40s, I don't know what I'm doing as when it
Right.
comes to parenting. And so
Right.
where does
Well,
that leave someone who is in her 20s?
it's not just that though. I think that generation of like Iranians that came here, it's not, I mean, think about it from a financial standpoint. They lost everything. And
Everything.
like as a person who loves finance, like we're saving all the time. We're talking about IRAs, we're talking about this, that. Like they did all that. Even if they did all that, they had savings, they had homes, they had land. They lost everything and started from zero. Like their
Right.
fears were not unfounded. So we are
Exactly.
carrying that with us all the time as children of that generation.
At the same time, they are so brave. I say the irony is that my parents and so many of their
Absolutely.
immigrants of their generation who were from war-torn countries, they came here. Yes, on the one hand, they gave up everything. For my parents, the biggest thing they gave up was their family. They were young, so it wasn't like they
Absolutely.
lost land or money, but my dad was here to get educated, so he had
Right.
hope some hope and promise here. But my mother, especially to like leave her family at that age, and her sister and her brother and her cousins, and yet they do this really brave thing, and then they come here and they're like, the risk meter is tapped out. Like,
Right.
we are not pushing the envelope anymore.
Completely.
We are not
Completely.
pushing our luck.
Right. Exactly. And yeah, reading the book and knowing your trajectory, I was surprised. Like, I mean, it's such a vulnerable book, and you really put everything out there every step of the way, how you were really hesitant. But looking at you just from the outside, like, I'm glad you wrote that because I would have never known. Looking at you from the outside, it's like you've done incredibly brave things every single step of the way, including, writing this book. I think was very brave. I'm putting it all out there, but also just like leaving these kind of safe trajectory jobs. Iranians are famous for telling their kids, like, be a lawyer, be a doctor. Those are very
Right.
safe. But then you not only didn't do the safe thing, but you went out on your own, and like you've been doing this podcast on your own. That's incredible to me.
Yeah. I thank you for saying that. I think that yeah, that I get that a lot. Like I don't understand how somebody who
Yeah.
has your career, who has to always be putting herself out there, also
Yes.
harbors fear. And I say, well, that's it. I don't pretend to be fearless. I have learned how to have I think a mature relationship with fear, which just means that I'm not exceptionally brilliant or anything. It's just that fear and I go way back, and I guess that's my advantage.
Right.
But as an adult woman, I couldn't be where I am if I was always overreacting to fear like I was as a kid. If I was like what the culture says, even now, you have to fight your fears or ignore your fears, or what our instinct sometimes tells us when fear
Right.
arrives is that we have to maybe just give up. And instead, I have always, not always, it's more of a recent recognition in my like late 20s and 30s is that when fear shows up for me, I know it's not going to just go away on its own. That's not how fear works. My best bet is to turn to it and say, all right, what is the message that you want to deliver to me?
Right.
I may listen to it, I may not, but we're going to have it. We're going to have it out,
Right.
which is more than we ever do with fear.
Right. And something that maybe I don't remember this coming up in the book, but I think a good example of this in your life is that when you were working in a more safe job, you made a point to have like a year's worth of savings,
Yes,
so that I think that stuff is super important. Like, look at your fear and then see how to make yourself as like safe as possible
exactly. There's so
when
many
making a
things.
brave decision.
Yeah, and I think I get that from my Persian dad. I think that he did do more of the safe things in life. And my mother, had she been given a chance to pursue a career really, and uh, someone had said to her, "What do you want, Shada? And how can I help you?" She never got those messages.
Right.
I did. So had my mother gotten those offers, I think she would have been the entrepreneur. She has a little bit more of a zealousness to her, and I think that's why maybe she works well with my father. They didn't always, but there is a good pairing there. And so with my dad's teachings of walking the straight and narrow, and then pairing that with my own ambitions to push boundaries, I think that's where like sort of you see my life play out, where yes, I am doing all these sort of like out there things, risky things, but never without a plan, never
Exactly.
without
A life floor after.
a net to fall back on.
Yes.
And that is the fear that has helped me, right? So I think that the fear of uncertainty merited its own chapter in the book. That's something that we all grapple with. But when I fear uncertainty, and that's a lot of times in my career, how can it not be present? I feel like my job is to use that fear to protect what that fear wants me to protect, which is my security and my sense of control, which doesn't mean that I have to sit here and try to guess where the economy is going to go or guess if someone's going to give me a job. It means, what are the things that are real and secure and things that I can control within my reach, which
Right.
is my ability to save, my ability to pay off debt, my ability to bring down my expenses, my ability to create a plan, which may not work out, but at least it's something, and to keep putting one foot in front of the other. Whereas I think often when the fear of uncertainty arrives, our thought is like, I just have to throw my hands up in the air, because
Right.
what is life? What can I control? Like, I'm going to just give up.
Right.
But it's
Absolutely.
actually a calling to harness your resources.
Absolutely. And then you've talked about this a lot. So your name is Farnoosh, and your little brother, who's 10 years younger, is Todd, which
Right.
I love. I love that. And your parents actually talked about that. You have a really sweet episode where your parents came on your podcast and they you were like,
Yeah,
why did you name me Farnoosh and this kid
I
Todd,
know.
which I love. But
The
how,
yeah.
oh yeah, go ahead.
Okay, you want to know this?
I want to know that. Yes, tell the listeners the story. I love the story.
It's sort of implied in that he is almost 11 years my junior. So, like many immigrants who come here, the goal, it's not to completely assimilate, but look, everyone in my family changed their names. My dad changed his name to Adam. My mom changed her name to Sheila. I was given the opportunity to change my name, and I really thought about it. I experimented with it. I write about it. I was Nikki, Ashley, Christina, Tina. It never stuck. And then I just, ended up being Farnoosh forever. And I think I'm so happy for that. My brother came almost 11 years later. At this point, my parents are living in like a suburb. They're living in a development, a Toll Brothers development, where everything in our closet is from the Gap. And my my parents had this Iranian couple friend from Bethesda, Maryland. The father was a doctor, the mother was a homemaker. They had beautiful children. Their kids went to Georgetown. Their son became a doctor. That son's name was Todd. So my mother was like, and from here on, your name shall be Todd, And so, but actually his first name is Ali, which he actually, like, I think he might have even gotten rid of it because he was realizing that and Todd's his middle name, but we always called him Todd, but when it was still on his license, and whenever he would go to the airport during like 9/11, or that post 9/11 or during the Iraq War, he would always get pulled out.
Wow.
Because he looks very more Irooni than I do. He's darker.
Okay.
He looks like me, but he looks like people don't know where to place me sometimes. Like if you're familiar with Iranians, you immediately know I'm Iranian.
Right.
But otherwise you're like, are you Greek? Are you Spanish? Are you Israeli? Right. I love that. I love that I'm sort of this like
ambiguously ethnic
person. But my brother is like, he gets screened a lot and at airports and stuff. And back in the day. And so he just was like, I don't want the distraction. I don't want to not make my flight. It's kind of sad, but he did drop the Ali from his.
But does he feel like a Todd? Does he seem like a Todd? Like he embodies
Oh my
Todd?
Gosh, we joke about it because there are a lot of jokes about Todds, right? There's this famous comedian who, Todd is like that guy, who's like sort of the bro and the jerk and the entitled one. He's not that.
Okay.
Not at all. But I think that I write about how we become our names.
Yeah.
And I think that my brother would probably surprise people because we have a sense of who Todd is in our minds, and he's nothing like that. He's like, we think Ken dolls, I think Todd, right. I think Ken, I think Brad, I think.
Right.
That's not him at all. He's actually more Farsi. He speaks Farsi better than I do. He knows how to read and write in Farsi. Because also I want to mention that, because he was born in the 90s, in the late 1900s, as we say now, that it was a safer time to go to Iran. It was like this window, right, in the 90s where you could go back and forth. My grandparents came, my parents went, and I was already in college though. Right. So I missed out on those trips. And he would go and spend a month in Iran during his summers and got to know our cousins. And so I think it's really interesting that the Todd has probably more of an attachment to our roots. Whereas I struggled with that so hard in the 80s, feeling kind of isolated as like the only girl who was from Iran and didn't have a connection to anybody overseas. And that said, though, Farsi was my first understood language. I didn't speak English going into preschool, and it was a quick learn, but I always like to, it's a bragging, right? Like, English is my second language, like, but of course I speak English much better now.
Right. But yeah, so then with the age gap in like the 80s was also like the Iraq hostage crisis, all that kind of stuff. Like, how is his relationship with fear compared to yours? Like, was he also Tarsu or is
yes.
Is he? Okay. Interesting.
Yes, very much. It's in our DNA. I definitely think there is a biological over-indexing of fear in our family, in probably more on my mother's side of the family, because I read a lot about my grandmother too, and how she was like our matriarch of fear. she was the one who had the foresight because of the fear of everything that was going down in Iran in the late 70s to encourage her children to leave. Which is a
Interesting.
hard thing for a mother to do. You're very torn. On the one hand, you don't want to be distant from your children, but on the other, being close means their future is uncertain.
Right.
So her healthy panic got my parents out, and I think it's part of who my mother is too, very much. And then we inherited it from her. My brother has had more struggle with anxiety than I think I have. Um, I think that, I don't know. Maybe we should do an episode with my brother. I'd love
Yeah.
to, because I think he's done a lot of work on his own ability to he meditates. He has a lot of sort of tools in his arsenal to help him with his anxiety. And I think part of it is hereditary, but I think a lot of it too could just be that he had a lot of pressure growing up as my brother. Yeah.
Right. Yeah.
With a sister who's 10 years ahead, and seeing what I'm doing and wanting to do the same, wanting to maybe be a homeowner I was a homeowner in my 20s. He wasn't able
Right.
to because it was a different economy, frankly. Um, I knew immediately what I wanted to do. He didn't. And I think he struggled with that. I think there was a story about how he transferred colleges because my parents really wanted him to go to UC Irvine
Uh-huh.
because it's a great school, and he didn't because there was no social life there. He got there and everybody would go home on the weekends, and he was lonely and he was kind of in a rut. So he transferred to another school, and thankfully my parents supported that. But in the beginning they didn't, and that was a struggle. So I think that he is more of a people pleaser than I am.
Gotcha. Gotcha.
100% more of a people pleaser. And so I had I love my parents, but I got out of Dodge quite quick. And
Right.
he stuck around. And I think that even to this day, I think my parents have more of an influence on him than they do me. But I remember being his age and how I had to learn a better way. I had to create boundaries. And that's what I try to tell him sometimes. I'm like, Todd, he's like, but how can you do that? They're your
Right.
family. And I'm like, the relationship actually gets better when you create those boundaries. It may not seem that way right now, but
Right.
you're getting trampled on. And if you create boundaries, when you give your family ultimatums, like I did one time my mother, when she was
Oh,
not very charmed and happy with my now husband and the relationship. Nothing against my husband. I've written
right.
about it in my last book about how I'm the breadwinner, and she was like skeptical of that.
Wow. Yeah.
And I said to her, here's to what are you more afraid of, Mom? I played the fear card. I said, you're more afraid of me falling in love with a man that you don't approve of at the time, like this relationship, not the man, the relationship that you don't
Right.
like endorse, or are you more afraid of me never ever ever giving you any more updates on my life?
Wow.
And at that point, I think that's a healthy way of sort of analyzing situations sometimes, right? Like, I'm
Right.
actually more afraid of the latter, and so I think I should probably change my
Right.
attitude. And she did, um she's apologized, we've reconciled, it's good now, but it had to start with coming to terms with what are you actually afraid of? Because you pressuring me because you're afraid to do something that is going to make me unhappy is going to backfire. And then you'll have
Wow.
something even more frightening to deal with.
That's huge. I feel like a lot of parents or kids of Iranian parents need to hear that because it's,
Copy paste that script, y'all.
I know that is
What are you
so
more afraid
good.
of? Steering your fear that I'm going to do something that you don't like, but that will mean my unhappiness, or the fear of never getting updates because I just can't deal with this feedback.
That is
It's
so
not
good because
working for me.
that's actually, I mean, I went through that. I feel like I've told some younger friends this now that the period where you're like trying to figure things out to where you get married and you get settled is such a difficult relationship with like a Iranian mother and daughter. I feel like that's the hardest period of time.
Yeah.
And for me, I mean, we have this whole, maybe it parallels with the whole like in Iran, you're a different person outside of the house as you are inside of the house. And I feel like I internalized that. And I was just like, okay, I guess they cannot handle it. This is the person I am to my family. And then this is the person I am like to. So I stopped giving updates. Like that
Yeah.
was for years. It was just like, I would just do my own thing. And it was like, I would still talk to my mom, but we weren't as close as we could have been. So if
Yeah.
I'd had that script, that would have been amazing. That was.
Yeah. I think, I don't know why I think it was the New York energy in me.
Yeah, yeah, no kidding. How did you get that?
I
That's
think I was just
amazing.
like, I was a television producer. I didn't have time to waste. I was like, this is it. This is where we're at. This is the center of conflict.
I love to hear it. And then how do you feel about your kids now? Like you're in a completely different position than your parents were, obviously. How is your relationship with your kids? Like what do you try to instill with them about bravery and fear and all that stuff?
Well, whenever they feel scared, I never say that's not a good thing or try to be fearless. Whenever whatever they're feeling, whether it's sadness or anger or fear, I don't want them to feel small over it. I let them sit in it for a little bit. I don't want to be the mom who's like, stop crying. Why are you crying? Why are you upset? Why are you happy? I think I think rarely we say that, but I think it's just important to let my kids and all kids know that all feelings are valid. And this is not me talking. This is like all the therapists and all the books I'm reading about how when we are able to let all of our emotions play out in a sort of, in a healthy way and give ourselves the space and the place to express our feelings, we end up being happier. There was actually a study this year that was done across multiple universities. They had two cohorts. One group was asked to give their reaction to these quote unquote bad feelings that we characterize in our culture, like sadness, anger, fear. And then, the cohort they found that was sort of looking at all these emotions as either neutral or good was happier than the cohort that looked at those, examined those emotions and necessarily thought these are not good ones. We need to fight them, we need to push them down, that happiness is the goal. And yes, happiness is the goal, but on the road to happiness, I think that it requires knowing yourself and being comfortable in your skin.
And have you come across that either it's Hafiz or Rumi poem exactly what you're talking about? Do you know which one I'm talking about
No,
where
but I want
the
it. I want it, and then
Okay,
put it on a t-shirt.
I'll find it for you, but it's like the emotions can come to your door and you just welcome them, but you don't like let them come into your home, but you still acknowledge them and welcome them. I don't know exactly what it is. I'll find it for you.
Oh my gosh. Well, I never saw that, but I do talk about how a healthy state of panic is your permission to bring fear to your doorstep
Yes,
and
exactly.
be the host, though. So often we treat fear as this like guest that's overextended its stay and a guest that might be rude and uncompromising. No, we are the adults in the room. We are the human beings in the room. When the fear shows up, we can still have a cordial relationship, but we have to remember that the power tilts in our favor and we're the ones that have the agency and the choice to decide what to do with it. And in my life, I have found many ways to use fear in positive, healthy, constructive ways with money, with my career and my relationships, with my relationship with myself. And I'm really excited to bring this out. And I think people are ready for this conversation. We're so tired of this toxic happiness, wellness. It's like, can I just be real for a minute?
Right. Yeah. But that's funny. I read the doorstep thing and I was like, oh, she's about to bring up the Hafiz or Rumi,
Oh my gosh.
whichever one it is. So I'll find that and I'll send it to
Thank
you
you.
because it's very, very applicable. That's something I always ask my guest that I'd love to know. So Farsi is your first language. So do you still speak it? What's your relationship with the Persian language right now?
Oh, it's so funny. My parents were just here visiting for a couple of weeks, and we go back and forth, English, Farsi, English, Farsi.
Okay.
Then their friends came, their friends from long, long ago came to visit. So we were all in the house, and the parents, the adults were all, well, I'm an adult, but all the,
Yeah.
my
Gotcha.
parents
Yeah.
and their friends were all speaking in Farsi. And so I'm much better at understanding Farsi. I understand almost all Farsi. It's the dialogue that sometimes stumps me, but I have to say when I'm around others, it comes back. It's like riding a
Right.
bike. And I love being able to speak Farsi so that, my kids will understand what I'm saying, or I'm in public with
Right.
my mom. Although I have to be careful about that because there are more Iranians around than you might think.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. And then what about your kids? Like, what's their relationship like with
Oh,
being
they really
Iranian?
want
Do they?
they know obviously, and they're very proud of that. I'm trying to put more, it's where we live, there aren't a lot of Iranians. And when we were in Brooklyn, they would go to Persian school, Farsi school, and that was, but it's getting a little bit, my mom, I've asked her, I was like, can you do some Zoom sessions with the kids like once or twice a week? My daughter especially, I think she has a knack for languages and would pick it up quick. It's just, as it's difficult to do it. You have to be very intentional about it, especially when you're not all Iranian or you're not in an Iranian community. But maybe they'll just start listening to you, Layla. I'll just turn them into you.
I tell everyone's like, do you have a program for your kids? And I'm like, I feel like kids are too smart for a program like this. Like we need this kind of like lessons or whatever. But kids, you just put like look for SpongeBob Farsi on YouTube.
SpongeBob Farsi?
It's amazing.
What?
SpongeBob Farsi. It's amazing. Like am too old for SpongeBob. I didn't watch it growing up, but the translators in Iran have made it into this like they have the best voices, amazing like culturally
Get
appropriate
out.
jokes, and
My son is so into SpongeBob right now. I'm
there you go,
kind of
SpongeBob Farsi. That's all you need. You don't need like China conversation lessons for kids. They're
okay.
they're beyond that.
I love that.
But yeah,
Okay.
that's what I recommend, SpongeBob Farsi. That's the secret. So we have SpongeBob Farsi Tuesdays in my house. So we watch like, and I just love. It's like Bluey. Like you love
Yes.
watching Bluey.
Oh, we
Love
just saw
watching.
Bluey on stage.
Oh, amazing.
That was a
Speaking of scary.
50 minutes though. I was like, how long is this going to be? But it was
Yeah.
less than an hour. It was just right.
Right.
I want to write a children's book, I think, based on this. I have so many examples in my life where in my children's lives, they remind me of my book a lot because my daughter, for the example, the other day, she didn't want to go to school because she had fallen down on the jungle gym and she had scraped her face. And so the next morning, she's like, Mommy, I don't want to go to school. The kids are going to point at my face. And as much as I wanted to keep her home from school, because we've all had that, we all want to just like
Right.
not deal with it. I said, okay, I get that you're scared. I understand. So when the fear, in this case of rejection, shows up, your job is sometimes to go where you are loved. And let's find out who loves us. I love you. Your teacher loves you. So let's write your teacher a note and let her know that you're scared so she can work with you and the classroom. And so we wrote her teacher a letter and gave it to her in the morning when she walked in. And I'm waiting to hear, like, is the teacher going to email me? And because basically we just said, Colette's really anxious. She's fearful, her face, all of that, worried the kids are going to make fun of her. So then the teacher decided to make this like a teachable moment and said, ask my daughter, would she be comfortable sharing her fear with the class? And she said, okay. Because it's the class, the kindergarten classes, just, they're like the most loving kids. They just
Totally.
ooze love. And when she expressed it, oh my gosh, what it resulted was m- more than I could have hoped for. One little girl raised her hand and said, Colette, my daughter's name was Colette. That happened to me last weekend on the playground. And another kid said, you know what I'm afraid of? And everybody was just doing like a fear share and hugging. And she wrote to me, the teacher, and she just said, thank you for letting me know because it gave me something to opened the classroom with this morning that was really, really touching, and no one's going to forget this. And so when the fear of rejection shows up, go where you are loved, find the people you can trust, and share your fears, and you will find resolution. It was great. And I feel like that is a book. Like that is a little children's story that all kids
Definitely.
and adults can relate to.
I feel like this book for me was that too. You kind of forget all these stories. I had a really bad haircut in 7th grade, and I actually switched schools because of it. That's one of those stories that would come out if I, yes, that's a story for another time. But I mean, reading this book kind of took me back to those feelings. And I think it's important to stay in touch with that because right now, it's easy to forget. You get caught up in day-to-day life. You are, doing well with your work or whatever is going on. It's hard to forget those moments where you were really scared and alone and just feeling like nobody could understand you. Right. So reading your book really brought those memories back for me in a really good way. I really appreciated it.
Thank you.
You also tied it together with like what's going on in Iran right now at the end. And I think our audience will absolutely love the book. It's wonderful to read and to hear your experiences and remember our own experiences. So
I'd love to offer a giveaway to somebody in your audience who we can work it out later, but yes. I would love to gift this book to someone in your audience who really, really wants it and sign it and mail it out to them. So maybe I would suggest leave Leyla a review for this podcast. Let them know you love Leyla and we'll pick somebody.
You're very good at that, leaving the reviews. I always forget to ask people. Yes. Good idea. We'll do a giveaway and I'm looking forward to hearing what everyone thinks of this book. It's wonderful.
Thank you so much.
Thank you so much for talking with me. Like I said, this is years in the making. I've been wanting to talk to you so much.
And you're going to come on my show.
Absolutely. Absolutely. We'll talk about all things money, which is my favorite topic.
Love it. Love it. Can't wait. Thank you.
All right. Well, good luck on the rest of your day of interviews and beautiful background.
Thank you.
And talk to you soon.
Absolutely. Bye.
Bye.